I spent $1,800 on Christmas gifts, and none of them were for my own son. On Christmas morning, Eli unwrapped a single pen. Budget was tight, his father said. Eli looked at me with wide, confused eyes and softly asked, "Was I bad this year?" Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Cassie Harper, and Eli is 6. I had been saving secretly for months, determined to make my sister Ria's kids feel special. Milo and Lena, her 2 little ones, had been extra good this year, or so I thought, and I wanted Christmas to feel magical for them. Ria's house would be filled with laughter and surprises, while ours was quietly shrinking under Troy's careless spending. Money had been tight, but I didn't want Eli to notice. I worked extra hours, skipped small treats, and quietly tucked away gifts for Milo and Lena, a toy train for Milo, a dollhouse for Lena, and a few surprises they would never forget. Every time I saw Eli playing or asking questions, my heart twisted a little, but I convinced myself it was okay. Family came first, I told myself, even if it meant my own child got less. When Troy handed Eli that pen, I felt my stomach drop. I had imagined his excitement, the sparkle in his eyes, the giggles tearing wrapping paper. Instead, there was confusion and a small, hopeful question: was I bad this year? I couldn't answer, couldn't hold back the hurt bubbling inside. That moment planted a seed of quiet anger and resolve, one that would grow as I began to realize the truth about Troy, Ria, and how far they were willing to go to put my son last. The year had been draining. Bills piled up faster than we could handle, and every paycheck seemed to vanish before I knew it. Troy rarely discussed our finances with me, yet somehow found ways to spend freely on things that didn't matter. I kept quiet, picking up extra shifts, skipping small comforts, and quietly tucking away whatever I could spare for Christmas. My heart ached watching Eli's excitement grow, knowing the gifts I wanted to give him might never come. Inside our home, the tension was constant. Troy brushed off conversations about money, claiming I worried too much, yet he dismissed Eli's requests with ease. "It's just a pen," he'd say, laughing at the boy's disappointed face. Every time he did, a quiet fire of frustration ignited in me. I wasn't just angry at the money, it was the disregard, the way my son's happiness was brushed aside, and how my efforts always seemed invisible. I felt invisible too. My sacrifices, my careful planning, the nights I stayed awake making sure we could make it through the month, all went unnoticed. Troy acted as if managing a household was effortless, but I knew the reality. I carried the weight of decisions, the anxiety of overdue notices, the endless worry that Eli would feel less than, that he would think his worth measured only by what he received. Christmas should have been a moment of joy, but under the surface, bitterness bubbled quietly. I wanted Eli to feel love, warmth, and magic, not the sting of neglect. And in that quiet despair, a plan began to form, not out of spite, but out of necessity. I needed to protect my son and show that his happiness mattered more than Troy's carelessness, more than anyone's dismissal of what truly counted. I stared at the piles of carefully wrapped presents, each tag bearing Milo's or Lena's name. My hand shook slightly as I placed the last box under the tree. Every choice I made was deliberate, every dollar spent a secret act of love for my sister's children. Meanwhile, Eli's corner remained bare, save for a small pen tucked quietly in a corner, an afterthought. I told myself it was for harmony, that smoothing over family tensions was worth the sting. Ria had complained once or twice about feeling stretched thin, and I didn't want to argue. I reminded myself it wasn't permanent, that next year Eli would have his share. But as I watched him run toward the living room, eyes wide with excitement, I felt the ache deepen. Sacrificing my son's joy wasn't easy. A part of me ached to scoop him into my arms, to whisper that he deserved better, that his worth wasn't measured by ribbons or wrapping paper. And yet, I kept silent, smiling as Milo and Lena tore through their gifts, laughter filling the room while a quiet shadow lingered over Eli. Inside, a storm brewed. Generosity warred with resentment. I wanted to give, to nurture, to make someone else's holiday bright, but each gift I handed to Ria's children carved out a piece of my pride. I felt unseen, as if my efforts counted for nothing, as if Troy and the world didn't notice the weight I carried quietly every day. Even in the act of giving, I was keeping score in my heart. Every carefully chosen present was a reminder that my son had been overlooked, that my sacrifices were invisible. Yet, deep down, I promised myself something: Eli would never feel second. I would find a way to make him whole again, even if it meant standing alone against everyone else. The morning light streamed through the curtains, glinting off ribbons and paper scattered across the living room. I forced a calm smile as Troy handed Eli a single, plain pen, its metallic sheen mocking the anticipation I'd imagined in my son's eyes. I felt a hollow ache in my chest, swallowing the lump in my throat so he wouldn't notice my disappointment. Across the room, Milo and Lena tore into lavish packages: dolls with sparkling dresses, a miniature train set, building kits that whirred and clicked. Their squeals filled the space with joy, but it was a cruel contrast to Eli's quiet, puzzled excitement over a pen. My heart twisted as I watched him clutch it, trying to smile, trying to understand why his world felt so small this morning. Was I bad this year? Eli asked softly, his voice fragile, innocent. The question cut through me, sharper than any words I could speak. My mind raced, searching for reassurance I couldn't fully give. I wanted to scoop him into my arms, tell him he was loved beyond measure, that no gift could define his worth, but the anger simmered just beneath my calm exterior. I masked my feelings, laughter and polite praise spilling from my lips as Rhea cooed over her children's excitement. Inside, a storm raged: heartbreak at seeing my son overlooked, fury at Troy's thoughtlessness, and betrayal at the subtle collusion I began to suspect. Every smile I forced felt like a small act of endurance, a promise to shield Eli from disappointment while the adults around him failed to notice. In that quiet, shimmering morning, I made a vow: this would not define us. I would ensure Eli's joy, his sense of worth, would never again be traded for appearances, indulgence, or convenience. Something had to change, and I would be the one to make it right. I stepped into the kitchen to grab a cup of coffee, hoping the morning chaos would settle. That's when I caught them, Troy and Rhea, huddled by the counter, snickering over something. At first, I didn't understand, but then the words hit me like ice: I can't believe we only spent that much on Eli. Cheap, right? Rhea laughed, nodding eagerly. My stomach turned. The realization hit me in an instant: they had planned this together. Every tiny detail, the disparity between gifts, the excitement reserved for Milo and Lena, was no accident. My own child had been deliberately overlooked. The warmth and generosity I had assumed existed between family members suddenly felt like a cruel performance, a mask hiding their disregard. I felt my chest tighten, a mix of disbelief and anger washing over me. How could the people I trusted most dismiss Eli's happiness so casually? How could they conspire behind my back, treating him as if he were less than, as if he mattered only as an afterthought? The laughter echoed in my ears, mocking the sacrifices I had made quietly, the long nights I had spent ensuring even a semblance of normalcy. Betrayal isn't always loud. Sometimes it's whispered over mugs of coffee, hidden behind polite smiles. This one cut deeper than any argument or misunderstanding. I realized then that the person I needed to protect wasn't just myself, it was Eli. No one else would put his worth first if I didn't. A quiet determination settled over me, stronger than the hurt. They might have thought this was harmless fun, but I had seen the truth. Their underestimation, their disregard, would become the very thing that set the stage for what came next. I refused to let my son's joy be stolen, not now, not ever. Later that day, I found Troy alone in the garage, tinkering with his tools as if the morning hadn't happened. I took a deep breath, steeling myself, and stepped forward. "We need to talk," I said quietly, each word measured. He glanced up, smirking slightly, as if he already knew the topic and wasn't concerned. "I don't see what the big deal is," he said casually, shrugging. "It's just gifts. Eli has a pen, he should be happy with what he got." His tone, so dismissive, made my blood boil. Gratitude? From him? For what? For ignoring my son's needs while spoiling his sister's children? My chest tightened, and I had to fight the urge to yell, to let him feel the weight of what he had done. I turned away, forcing myself to breathe. Anger mixed with sorrow, a bitter cocktail that settled in my gut. Eli deserved better. I deserved respect, not just as a mother, but as someone whose contributions had been quietly ignored all year. I couldn't rely on Troy to understand. That night, as the house grew still and Eli slept soundly, I sat at the kitchen table, pen in hand, and began to make plans. Nothing dramatic, nothing reckless. Small moves, deliberate actions that would remind Troy who truly held the balance of care and attention. Quietly, I considered ways to reclaim control, to make decisions that protected my son and my dignity without confrontation. A subtle power shift began in my mind. I could no longer allow myself to be invisible, overlooked, or dismissed. Troy's ignorance became my motivation. Each calculated thought was fueled by a mix of frustration, determination, and the fierce desire to shield Eli from further neglect. The morning's betrayal had planted a seed, not just for retaliation, but for restoring justice in our small, fragile world. I refused to let my emotions dictate my next move. Storming, yelling, or lashing out would only feed Troy's arrogance. Instead, I decided to act deliberately, to observe, record, and prepare. Every careless purchase, every dismissive comment about Eli, every time Troy brushed off responsibility, I noted it all. Receipts, bank statements, even small moments he didn't think anyone noticed became evidence of his negligence. At the same time, I quietly began setting aside a portion of our money, hidden where Troy would never suspect. Little by little, I built a secret fund for Eli, ensuring that when the time came, he would receive the care and joy he deserved. I watched him laugh, play, and ask innocent questions, determined that his happiness wouldn't hinge on Troy's thoughtlessness. Each day, my resolve strengthened. Documenting Troy's patterns wasn't about punishment alone, it was about establishing clarity, creating undeniable proof that could not be ignored. Every overlooked allowance, every ignored need, every moment of favoritism toward Ria's children became a thread in a tapestry I was weaving, one that would eventually expose his selfishness and protect my son. I also planned for subtle reminders, ways to show Eli that he was valued, loved, and worthy, even if Troy continued to underestimate him. Small gestures, hidden gifts, notes of encouragement, little victories that he would feel but Troy could not control, became my tools. What began as frustration transformed into strategy. Anger evolved into focus. I knew I had to be patient, to let Troy's disregard reveal itself in time, and to ensure Eli would never bear the weight of someone else's negligence again. The seeds of change were planted, quietly, deliberately, and I would watch them grow until justice was no longer optional, it was inevitable. I started with small, deliberate gestures, creating moments where Eli could shine without drawing Troy's attention. At family gatherings, I made sure to quietly showcase his talents, drawing a picture he'd been working on, solving a puzzle faster than anyone expected, or sharing a story that made everyone laugh. Relatives noticed his intelligence, his curiosity, his kindness. Troy, distracted and dismissive, barely acknowledged these moments, leaving a gap I made sure others could see. Each time Milo or Lena received excessive praise for minor achievements, I subtly contrasted it with Eli's accomplishments. I didn't scold or argue, I let his natural brilliance speak for itself. Cousins, aunts, and uncles began commenting, asking how he learned so much, marveling at his patience and creativity. Troy's lack of recognition became more obvious with every gathering, and I felt a quiet satisfaction knowing the truth was visible without me pointing fingers. I also arranged simple family activities, baking cookies, assembling small crafts, or reading aloud together, where Eli's confidence could grow. These were ordinary moments, but they highlighted Troy's inattentiveness, his inability to celebrate the very child he claimed to care for. By letting Eli thrive naturally, I forced Troy's negligence into the open, revealing the imbalance between his treatment of my son and his indulgence of Ria's children. Each event strengthened my quiet influence. I wasn't retaliating with confrontation or anger, I was letting actions speak louder than words. The more Eli flourished, the more obvious Troy's favoritism became. Slowly, carefully, I was reclaiming control, creating a narrative in which my son's worth was undeniable and Troy's disregard could no longer hide behind casual excuses. I invited my Aunt Lorraine over that afternoon, knowing her presence would keep things balanced. Troy lounged on the couch, confident, unaware that today's conversation would not be easy for him. I took a deep breath and approached slowly, keeping my voice even, controlled. "Troy," I began, "I need you to see something clearly." I laid out instances where he ignored Eli's requests, dismissed his achievements, and placed Ria's children above his own son. I didn't yell, I didn't accuse, each statement was factual, precise, undeniable. Receipts, notes, examples of overlooked moments, everything presented calmly. Eli sat beside me, holding my hand, watching intently. I could see the confusion in Troy's eyes fade into something heavier, realization, unease, embarrassment. My words painted a picture of neglect he could no longer deny, a record of favoritism that had been invisible only because he refused to look. Aunt Lorraine watched silently, nodding as each detail sank in. Troy's laughter vanished, replaced by a tight jaw and shifting eyes. I didn't realize, he stammered weakly, a poor defense against the evidence laid before him. I let the pause linger, allowing him to feel the weight of his own actions. "Ignoring Eli didn't just hurt him," I said softly, "it showed the imbalance in how you value those around you. He deserves recognition, care, and love, not tokens and excuses." The room stayed quiet except for Eli's soft sigh of relief. My heart swelled as Troy faced the truth, as his indifference collided with the reality he had caused. No yelling, no theatrics, just clear, unwavering confrontation. And in that stillness, I felt satisfaction, the quiet triumph of protecting my child and ensuring that his worth could no longer be overlooked. Weeks later, I finally handed Eli the presents I had been saving in secret. Carefully wrapped boxes, each chosen with his interests and dreams in mind, waited under a tree just for him. When he tore through the paper, his eyes sparkled with wonder, laughter spilling freely. This was the joy he had been denied, now restored through quiet planning and patience. Milo and Lena, accustomed to receiving lavish attention, paused to watch Eli. Their smiles faded slightly as they noticed the difference, thoughtful, meaningful gifts, each reflecting time, care, and love. Ria's expression shifted too, a subtle understanding dawning that quantity and expense did not equal devotion. The contrast was unmistakable, and it silently spoke of the depth of my dedication, my unwavering commitment to my son's happiness. Troy hovered nearby, attempting casual remarks, but his discomfort was evident. The carefully hidden truth, his oversight, his favoritism, his neglect, stood exposed. For the first time, he could see clearly that his actions had consequences, that overlooking Eli's needs could not erase the love and effort I had invested quietly for months. Eli hugged me tightly, his small voice full of gratitude and pure delight. At that moment, the tension, the pain, and the quiet anger that had built over the months melted away. Justice wasn't loud or vengeful, it was subtle, deliberate, and undeniable. I realized then that patience and thoughtfulness had become my most powerful tools. Troy's negligence was visible, Ria and her children had witnessed what true care looked like, and Eli finally held the joy he deserved. Emotional vindication settled over me, a quiet triumph not measured by confrontation, but by the proof that love, patience, and careful action could restore balance and honor what truly mattered most. The following year, I decided to create our own holiday tradition. Troy and Ria were no longer part of the planning. Eli and I baked cookies together, hung handmade decorations, and wrapped gifts that reflected his passions and imagination. The joy in his laughter filled the room, untouched by past disappointments, and for the first time, Christmas felt fully ours. Every detail mattered, from the tiny cards he colored to the careful arrangement of presents under our modest tree. Watching him beam, I felt a sense of empowerment I hadn't experienced before. I had protected him, ensured his happiness, and reclaimed control over what mattered most, his sense of worth and belonging. Troy, of course, had to face the consequences of his actions. He couldn't hide from the pattern of neglect, nor could he undo the lessons Eli had quietly learned. My son's confidence, curiosity, and excitement spoke volumes, a living reminder of what he had ignored for so long. Ria and her children could observe, perhaps silently understanding that love required effort, consistency, and attentiveness, not casual indulgence. This time I didn't focus on proving anything to them. My satisfaction was subtle, rooted in the knowledge that Eli finally had experiences designed for him, filled with attention, care, and thoughtfulness. No one else's opinions could diminish the bond we had nurtured or the security he now felt. As I tucked him into bed that night, he whispered, "This is the best Christmas ever." I smiled, heart full, knowing he meant it. The past no longer dictated our joy. Together, we had created a space of hope, warmth, and belonging. In that quiet, peaceful moment, I understood that protecting a child, asserting love over neglect, and building our own traditions had given us something far greater than any gift, a childhood he truly deserved.